Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim. Assalamu alaikum and welcome to this week's edition of The Issues. This week's special guest on The Issues is a very prolific businessman and a politician as well. His name is Amjad Bashir. He's a former MEP, and let's welcome Amjad Bashir to the show. Welcome, Amjad Bashir.
Thank you for inviting me.
Amjad, you served as a Member of Parliament for the Yorkshire and Humber region between 2014 and 2019 and was elected to the European Parliament in 2014 under the United Kingdom Independent Party banner. But it says that you defected, that's the word, defected to the Conservative Party in January 2015. Before we get into the politics of it all, let's hear a little bit about Amjad Bashir. Who is Amjad Bashir? Tell us a little bit about yourself.
Well, myself, I was born in Pakistan in a city called Jhelum. I came across and joined my father when I was 8 years old, came to sunny Bradford, was educated in Bradford, went all through the schooling system and ended up at Bradford University to do a degree in chemical engineering. In the meanwhile, my father had built up a very good business, which I was privileged to join, and really worked hard in that business, although my interest was different to my father's. My father was more into fabrics and fibre, etc. I wanted a different view, a different vocation. I became a restaurateur. If I say it modestly, one of the most successful restaurateurs in Bradford, firstly with the Kebabish, then with Sheikh's restaurant, and then with Zouk. But I'd always had a passion for politics. You said earlier that I defected to the Conservative Party. I'd like to put the record straight. I'd always been a Tory supporter, a Conservative supporter, and only joined UKIP because it was the only party actively fighting the cause for us to exit from the European Parliament, the only Brexit party. And when that was achieved, and I was persuaded to return to the Conservative Party, I returned.
You were persuaded? Well, we'll get back to that in a minute, whether it was persuasion or push. You know, they said that politicians are all liars, and you started off by telling a huge lie. You just said that you came to sunny Bradford. I've never seen it sunny myself, and so yeah.
Well, it was a little white lie.
A little white you're being racist.
I arrived, Harry. I arrived in Bradford. It was in the middle of winter. I never saw the sun for months on end, and I used to complain to my parents and said, "Where's the sun?" You know, coming from beautiful Pakistan, and here in winter, where the weather was a lot colder than now, by the way, where we had clouds all the time, rain all the time, and lots of snow patches as well. So you're absolutely right. I did tell a little white lie there.
Anyway, we'll let you off for that one. And I note that you're also a great admirer of the Prime Minister of Pakistan, Mr. Imran Khan. Why? You know, this open admiration for this man. What makes him different?
I think he's a very honest gentleman. I've met him many a time. I think he wants to do good in a country where there has been a lot of corruption, where there has been a lot of people, opportunist people, that have let the country down. I believe that this gentleman, because of his schooling, because of his travel, because of his ideas and ideals, he has already achieved a great deal, whether it was in cricket, whether he was building the hospital, Shaukat Khan Memorial Hospital, in memory of his mother who died of cancer. To achieve that, a state-of-the-art hospital in a country like Pakistan, which to raise millions upon millions, and to get the trust of the people to do it. And now politically he's trying to make a difference, and I support his endeavours.
Can Pakistan really handle an honest politician? Because they've never had that. It's something new to them. And as you can see, the oppositions are up in arms already. I think there's a Jalsa going on either today or tomorrow against Imran Khan, against the prices that are so high that the poor can't survive nowadays, even though he's trying to get the economy of the country moving by paying off the debts that his predecessors built up. So is Pakistan ready for an honest Prime Minister, do you think?
Harry, it's in the interest of the opposition to point out all the difficulties that Imran has faced since he came to power. It's in their interest. They want the status quo to continue, where the country fails, but they enrich themselves. That is their vision of Pakistan. My vision has always been very much like Imran, that if Pakistan is to succeed, it's got to succeed by the endeavours of the people themselves. It can't be imposed by the politicians, by the leadership. The people themselves have to have enterprise, hard work, have honesty, promise to deliver what they say, make promises which they can deliver, give good measure in weight, good measure in length, so that people trust you, guarantee the goods that you make. By having these simple principles, you become successful not only as a family, but as a society and as a nation. And if Pakistan embraces these principles, which are very simple, Pakistan will become successful. And Imran, to me, typifies these principles, which are very Islamic and which are, you know, akin to the people of Pakistan. It's been badly led for the last
70 years so.
There have been one or two politicians that haven't been like that, but mostly.
But you know, going back to the people, you know, the people can only get out and vote if they've got the energy to vote. You know, if they can't afford to feed themselves, you know, there's no way that they can support politicians who are starving them. At the moment, he's seen as a person who's put, you know, the price hikes are so much in Pakistan, the food is so expensive that you know, 70–80% of Pakistan is very poor, and they can't afford to feed themselves. And what do you think how do you think he can survive and override, get over this difficult period that Pakistan's going through, especially through COVID as well?
Yeah.
And we're going to cover that in a minute. But
Harry, you make a very good point. You and me, we both lived through difficult times in this country. You in the Royal Navy, me as a businessman. You witnessed in the late 70s and the early 80s, a change was needed in our country, in Britain. And the person that brought about that change was Margaret Thatcher. And in her first 5 years, a lot of people were made unemployed because of her policies. Not that she wanted to increase unemployment, but she needed to bring about radical change. We had inefficient mining industry which was causing death and misery to thousands of miners when we could buy in cheap coal from abroad. Why have our people slaving in the coal mines, a relic of 150 years ago when we were pioneers in mining, right? Why have that in the 20th century? Then also there were other people that could produce cotton or cheaper, make cotton goods cheaper than us. Why were we having? But
let me just take you back there to the miners. I think they're just opening a new coal mine now, the first one, deep coal mine in the UK. It came the news last week. The reason that they're opening it is because the coal that is being produced from that will be used to produce steel. And the knock-on effect of closing the mines is that we lost our steel industry as well, and all the other manufacturing that disappeared from this country as well. Do you think that was a price worth paying?
Listen, you've hit it on the head, Harry. We are a northern European country, which is high-tech. We need to produce high-tech materials. We can't produce the ordinary. Whether it's steel products, we need to produce high specification, which whether it's used by the airline industry, shipbuilding, but high spec, you know, robotics, etc. So what we need is the finest coal. What we need is the most technically advanced mining. What we need is the industry, which is you know, commensurate to our country, our nation. What we don't want is a third world economy.
Well, I agree with you. You know, in our opening introduction, I wanted to bring something up, which was that you are also known as Amjad Bashir. And I wanted to find out where the Bashir came from. And you're not allowed to throw that question back at me to say, where did Harry come from, okay? So.
Well, you actually said, where did Bashir come from? You meant, where did Peter come from?
Sorry, Peter came from.
Right. Well, I'll tell you, because I am fortunate enough to have 2 younger brothers, and I also have 3 sisters.
Okay.
So, as you will appreciate, in the Pakistani culture, you don't call your brother by name. Your elder brother, you don't call them Amjad. You say Bhaijan. And if you've got an elder sister, you say Baji. Right? So when I've opened my first discount store, a 7-Eleven if you like, my brothers would come from school and come and help me in my businesses, and they say, Bhaijan, where shall we put this? Bhaijan, where shall we do this? Right? And my friends, the English white friends, would hear this and say, what's all this Bhaijan? We can't pronounce that. We'll call you Peter.
Okay.
So it was a sign of affection.
Okay, welcome to the show, Peter. That's another issue out of the way.
Yes, Harry.
Right, Amjad, COVID. The whole world is talking about COVID. The country, you can't switch a news channel on without talking about COVID. And the effect that it is having on the north and the northwest and the northeast, especially Lancashire and Yorkshire, where we come from, does seem to be disproportionate to what is happening down south. And rightly, you know, the north and south is divided again on this issue. What do you think the government can do to persuade the north and the northeast and the northwest that we're in it together?
Harry, the thing is, 6 months ago, the roles were reversed. It was London that was in the eye of the storm, and the whole country was brought into a lockdown. And we supported the south, the northerners who had rates much lower than the south. We supported the south, and it's now time for the other way around as well. But times have moved on. 6 months ago, our hospitals were inundated, and we had to save the national health, and what we did was right. We saved the national health because we were not prepared. It was something that we hadn't encountered. The whole world had never encountered anything like this. So we didn't know about the virus. We know a lot more about the virus now than we did then. We weren't prepared. We didn't have the PPE. We didn't have the incubators, the oxygen equipment, etc. We now are far more aware of the virus itself. We've got the equipment, we've got the Nightingale hospitals, thousands of beds spread throughout the country. So we're far more prepared.
But you say that we're far more prepared. Whether it's more testing that's being done that's bringing up more cases, the economy is suffering. The whole country's economy is being put down, is being brought down for this virus. And do you think the is it worth the risk and the word that people are losing it? Thousands of jobs are being lost. Weatherspoon just declared today that, you know, they made the biggest first loss in their history, and maybe soon they'll start closing the pubs down as well. So, you know, the country is going to war, and yet there are more talks about national lockdowns, local lockdowns. You know, Lancashire is now going into tier 3, and Yorkshire may be going to tier 3 as well. Can our regions sustain and afford any lockdowns from the central government? Again,
Harry, the thing is, lockdowns, in my view, are no longer the answer. But there are lots of people that I know, industries that are in trouble. So lockdown, in my view, is not the answer. Yes, we have to identify regions which have the highest incidence of COVID-19. We have to do what we can for these areas. But a national lockdown, it didn't work. It arrested the numbers before, but it's not the answer. It's not the answer, because economically, if we live through this epidemic, do we want a bankrupt country? We can't afford to have a furlough scheme going on forever. We have to be careful what we do. So I think the Prime Minister and the government are trying their best to take science on board, right? To take on what's happened in the past, to bring about antidote for the virus, and keep the economy going as well.
So the government is trying to bring science on board. We'll talk about what the science is doing, and in a minute we're going to take a short break and we'll be right back.
The issues of Kashmir have been eluding the world for a long time. I'm going to be bringing it out from the shadows. Why is the world ignoring Kashmir? And will the world continue to turn its back on two warring nations, both of which have nuclear capacity? And why hasn't the UN implemented its own resolution policy? And will it? And for all these questions, we will be digging for the answers to these tough questions. Please stay tuned for my new program, exclusive on Kashmir, The Pulse, with Kirsten Seymour. Watch for it.
Hello and welcome back to The Issues with me, Harry Boota. I'm joined here today with the former MEP, Mr. Amjad Bashir, to discuss the issues that are blighting us in these days. And Amjad was a Brexiteer, what is called a Brexiteer. He was a member of Parliament, member of European Parliament, and also a Brexiteer. Now, you know, they get paid handsomely, these members of European Parliament. And some burning question, something that's always burnt me to ask him was, why would he put his job on the line and fight for Brexit, which is leaving the European Union, and lose his job at the same time? Amjad, interesting. Why did you put your job on the line and campaign for Brexit?
Yes, I was the turkey that voted for Christmas.
Mm-hmm. Did you get cooked?
Well, it turns out yes, because we finally managed to bring about Brexit and I'm out of a job. So that's fine. I believe that the principle is greater than my job was worth. I believe that, first of all, that we needed to have a referendum and let the British people decide whether we should remain in the European Union or not. We never had one since the early 70s when we went in, and that was a different question. We were joining the common market, and the common market has evolved to become a political union, and the country was yearning for an answer whether it wanted to be part of a political union or not. So we had to get the referendum. We brought about, because of our pressure in UKIP and otherwise, because of that, we got David Cameron, the Prime Minister, to promise a referendum. And then the country voted for Brexit. The country believed that it wanted to leave the European Union, be a more sovereign nation, to take back control of its borders, of its economy, of its laws, and make trade deals with the throughout the world.
Can I just take you back a little bit? You mentioned the word UKIP, and that's obviously the United Kingdom Independence Party, which you were a member of. Now, previous to that, you for 15 years, you were a member of the Conservative Party. And why would someone from the Conservative Party, and especially off the background that you have, would join a party that was inherently was called a very racist party? You know, extreme right wing, some used to call it. you know, what drove you, or what made you join the Conservatives, the United UKIP, should I say? Because it was the UKIP, on the back of UKIP, that you became successful as a MEP as well. So initially, what brought you into UKIP? How did you end up in UKIP, at the time a racist party, as to say?
Harry, UKIP as a party was never a racist party. If you look at their constitution, if you look at their aims and objectives, it was not racism, built on racism. There may have been individuals in the party that you could term racist. There are unfortunately people throughout society that are racist. I joined UKIP because it was the only party that was offering a referendum and wanting the people, put the question to the people whether we wanted to remain in or leave the European Union. At the time, the Conservative Party wasn't promising that. And to me, that was a fundamental burning issue. That's why, reluctantly, I left the Conservative Party and joined UKIP. But, you know, as I said earlier, when I became an MEP, when I was approached by the Conservative Party, by David Cameron, the Prime Minister, to return, I was glad to return because the UKIP had done its part.
There was scandal going on at the time, and I think I was, you know, I might as well let the listeners know that I was part of the UK Independence Party myself as well, at the same time as Amjad were, and so we were serving the same party. So I am privy to some of the scandal that was taking place at the time. And you said that David Cameron approached you. Was it not that you were about to be pushed from UK for the various investigations that were going on with regard expenses scandals, that you approached the Conservatives rather than the other way around?
Not at all. This is
Let's put the record straight then.
Sorry?
Let's have the record straight then.
No. This is a very unfortunate state of play in British politics, and especially with UKIP. They felt threatened by my move back to the Conservative Party, and they thought they'd malign me, throw dirt at me, and some of them would stick. Where is this so-called investigation that they were going to hand over to the police? What's happened? I'm still waiting for a knock on the door. Nobody's happened because, you know, I am absolutely, I have nothing to answer for, right? These were just, you know, some allegations made by them in a way to knock my credibility as somebody that we really didn't want. We're glad that he's gone. None of these have proved true. I've served 5 solid years in the European Parliament for the Conservative Party, and there's no allegation being proven whatsoever.
So your term in the European Parliament as a member of EU, let's talk about your time at the European Parliament. You know, what, in your opinion, what have you achieved in the 5 years that you were there? What would be your lasting legacy if anybody was to ask you that?
I think in the last 5 years being in the European Parliament, I learned how the European Parliament worked. I gained a great deal. I was able to input as much as possible in the committees that I sat on, whether it was foreign affairs and human rights, whether it was to do with the Rohingyas being exiled from Burma, whether it was the Kashmiri people being oppressed in their homeland of Kashmir by Indian occupation forces, whether, you know, speaking up for other injustices throughout the world. Human rights and foreign affairs was my forte. Okay, and also employment law, because I came from the business background. I knew a great deal about employer-employee relations, and I had a great deal of input into that to make sure that both British employers and employees were looked after, that their interests were best represented in the European Parliament, the legislation was made that was conducive to the success of our businesses, but also looked after the affairs of the employees of our country.
Well, you said that in your time as a MEP, you've learnt the workings of the European Parliament, and I think it'd be very interesting for us to learn how the European Parliament works, because a lot of people simply are not aware of how it works. And I think if you start to explain, maybe it'll take you 5-10 years to do it, but briefly tell us the crux of it, how it works, because from the outside it looks very, very a club that nobody can enter.
Harry, you raise a very interesting question. The thing is, as I said earlier, we, the British people, joined the European project when it was a group of countries wanting to trade with one another, right? Unfortunately, in the last 40 years, the percentage of trade that the European Parliament, the European region, European 28 nations as it was when I was a member, now 27, its percentage has diminished and diminished and diminished, whilst the rest of the world, the trade has gone up. There are reasons for this, because the Europeans have become a bureaucracy with inertia that prevents trade from growing. I of the belief that trade can liberate society, can make you richer, and can make you a trading nation, a global trading nation. This is what I sadly learned in the European Parliament, that it was a club to look after those 28 nations, and it was to look after some of the big boys rather than individuals. And it was a far-off parliament, whereas the British people wanted a parliament closer to home, governing them, rather than a parliament thousands of miles away.
But you said here that you were the European Parliament's Foreign Affairs and Employment Industry Committees. You know, there was other things that you were involved with, ECR group, etc. One of the things that I think you've visited Pakistan a number of times as well, with the Kashmir delegations. I think you've had a few issues, did you not, with regard to Kashmir? I think the pressure was on you to take a delegation of European members of European Parliament to India, and a delegation was put together. But sadly, I don't think you was part of that delegation. What happened?
Harry, what happened was that I was a delegation was going to visit India, and by the way, because I'm a conservative and a businessman, I do believe that trade should take place between countries. But I was critical that a trade mission should be going across to India at a time when India was subjecting the Kashmiri people to an oppression, unprecedented oppression, where the use of pellet guns were maiming and injuring hundreds, if not thousands of children. Children were being maimed, children were losing eyesight. The Indian forces had complete amnesty to do what they wanted. They let loose on the Kashmiri people 700,000-800,000 Indian forces oppressing, is it 8 million Kashmiris?
About 15, I think, is it?
Yeah, I'm sorry, I lost the number.
But what happened with the? Did you have some altercations with the Indian ambassador that? Because you were not granted the visa to visit India, wasn't it?
Indeed,
so that's what I was trying to ask you. What was the issues? What happened? Why were you not allowed into India to go and monitor, to go and see firsthand what was happening in the occupied Kashmir?
Harry, I find it beyond belief that a duly elected member of the European Parliament should be denied a visa as a member of the Parliament to visit India. And that's what happened. And it was because I was critical of Indian policy in Kashmir. I commended India for all its achievement in the last 70 years economically and socially. I thought they had achieved a great deal since independence. And after that, I did have criticism about their policy in Kashmir. And the Indian ambassador didn't like what I said. Now, these parliamentary debates, etc., is where you are supposed to tackle these issues.
Absolutely, absolutely.
And really, in a dignified way, if a parliamentarian who wants to visit your country, it was a wonderful idea, an opportunity for India to prove me wrong, to say, Amjad, this is what your views are false. Come to Kashmir, have a look. You know, this is not true what you're saying. You know, this is our true democracy. This is the reason why you should trade with us. But they shut the door on me.
So what was the? Did any of your colleagues support you? No, was there a solidarity from the other delegation? Did they rebel against India, or did they just carry on? Because it shows. Well, there was recently the member of Parliament of the British Parliament was sent back from the airport as well, who was a chairman of APPG on Kashmir. You know, so it's not just a one-off. But did you get any support from within the European Parliament when you were not given the visa?
Sadly, Harry, the Indian embassy, what they did was they didn't ban me from visiting India. They didn't not give me a visa. What they did was they delayed it until the delegation took off, and then I found my passport back in my pigeonhole, returned without a visa.
Okay.
Right. So Parliament then had very little time to do anything. But in my view, they should have done. They should have protested, and they should have really taken to task the Indian government for what they did.
But does it not show how...
Because they didn't, Harry, I'm sorry to interrupt you.
Sorry.
Because they didn't stand up for a parliamentarian being treated in this derogatory manner. Now that's why you're having more and more people being turned back at the airport, people being denied access, because the Indian government believes they've got away with it.
Well, they still keep getting away with it, and sadly, as I said, a member of British Parliament was turned away only a few weeks back, who was the chairman of the all-party parliamentary group in the British Parliament. So they are getting away with it, and sadly, nothing is being done. And I read today that the UK established a global human rights sanctions regime on the 6th of July this year, and which gives the UK new powers to take action against nations who are committing serious human rights violations. And now, what evidence does the UK government need that India is committing serious human rights violations? Because there has been a United Nations report on this. There has been a report from there's been two United Nations human rights reports on Kashmir, and there's been one from the European Parliament as well. So the evidence is clearly there, but why is the British government, even with given these powers on the 6th of July for the global human rights sanctions regime, are not taking any action against India? And they seem to be readily taking actions against little countries like Belarus, who's got sanctions against it.
Sadly, the case is that India is a big economy, and some nations are persuaded throughout the world that they should not cause a stir because they want to have trade links with India. To me, it's a sorry price to pay if you trade with somebody who has this lamentable record on human rights abuses. To me, you should have the strength of purpose to speak to people, and say, look, whilst we want to trade with you, what you're doing is wrong in Kashmir and other states as well. So I can only think that these countries are persuaded due to economic reasons.
My special guest today, that sadly brings us to the end of the show. My special guest today was Amjad Bashir, former MEP for Yorkshire and Humberside. And would you like to say the final word, Amjad, before we finally close down?
Just a word of thank you for inviting me to your program. I wish you every success. I hope that we are able to tackle and win this COVID test, COVID-19. I hope we come out economically also successful. We live through this epidemic, and I hope that we do a trade deal with Europe. But it's not just hope. We have to be strong as a nation, and we have to pull up our socks and go forward.
Thank you very much indeed, Amjad. We have to be strong as a nation, we have to be strong as people, and we have to be strong as communities and nations. And you've been watching the issues with me, Harry Boota. The world is full of issues. They never seem to go away, and for as long as they're there, we'll be here. Thank you for watching.